I'm all like this, eh? Now for only this country, now they go, you go beat more Peking, you go they say make you not cry. Now yeah, all of us there on Wednesday where the judge just dismiss all the Labour Party and Peter Obi petition. They say no, we say no wahala. They say the next day they go give a copy of the judgment. How they go, if you go appeal court, they won't go. Okay, till today now so they not going to see a judgment give them. Peter Obi don't cry and Labour Party don't cry. Say no wahala. Now say more go Supreme Court. We won't go. And people they talk say maybe Peter Obi rest, may not wasting money. Peter Obi begging for money. He tell you say not get money to take. But person don't start matter. You better say you give matter your best shot. Then if you want lose, you lose. You know say at least you try your best. Try be say maybe Peter Obi rest. He begging for money. Anyway, Rufai now Reuben Abati, they don't come and they don't choke man for this matter. So everyone help us beg appeal court people. That's what INEC first do that time. When I watched the video, Sha.
So I think we've talked about this ad nauseum. As expected, as we analyzed yesterday, both parties were going to go to the Supreme Court. Going to the Supreme Court is to be able to deepen our jurisprudence. I mean, there's some contextual issues. I'd like to hear the Supreme Court sound off on Abuja status, for instance, and also everything around, the electoral laws, more clarity, and this Beavers, conundrum and all of that, this Beavers IRF conundrum. So, and those are many other issues we would like the Supreme Court to serve on, to sound on, so that we can, get more insight and get more clarity. And very laymen like us, should be able to get insight as regards this. But please, we should not do this thing to our country. The court should release the judgment so that people will be able to read through it and file their case. If you remember, this was part of the things too that delayed the filing for the political parties, because INEC would not release content of the materials that it used to do the elections. And we remember when they said they wanted to recalibrate the Beavers and all of that. But in this case, it's totally different. I think the court will release it so that they'll be able to make quick applications between the 21-day threshold to be able to file, so we can get clarity on this matter. Most of them, I'm sure, they didn't say anything tangible. They just said they rejected the result because they don't have the facts of the matter. So they've not seen that certified true copy of the judgment. I'm sure their lawyers will dive in that and be able to look through all of that process. As regards the president, he will be very excited. I mean, no president wants to go through this ordeal of the uncertainty and all of that. Even when people have questioned, okay, why did he have the boldness to be able to go to India while this case was on, even when the conference is going to start, it's going to India will start between the 9th and the 10th. But he's been able to claw back by saying, yes, there was something on the sidelines called the B20, and they've been able to get some deals. We announced the 14 trillion deal and all of that. So that's the balancing of that argument. So he was really shaft, very, very, very excited. He was so excited he couldn't sleep. Good for him. And other candidates have said, oh, they reject this result. Let's see how all of this pans out in the Supreme Court. But what is certain is that apart from the Supreme Court, concerning this process, there are a lot more things that Nigerians will need to take back to the National Assembly. Because if the court, in the appeal court, is ruling that, okay, the use of IRF and other things are not made mandatory, and can do these things at their discretion, despite the fact that there are copious evidence. And there's a video circulating currently that shows Mr. Festus Okoye talking about the fact that Beavers is mandatory in consonance with the electoral laws. And also the process of transmitting results in consonance with the electoral laws. So if all of this has been said, then if the court says otherwise, and the Supreme Court also affirms the appeal court, then probably to be able to deepen our electoral process, there's a need to go back to the National Assembly and say, okay, let us hedge these laws and properly codify them. Because the reason why we brought technology to our electoral process in the first place is to be able to avoid the charade of elections we used to have over the years. And that's why a lot of people participated, especially the young people. And that's why INEC is being called to question now as regards what he said and what we are seeing. I yield the floor.
Okay, number one, President Tinubu saying that he was excited, and as a result of that, he slept late, and he got late to a business meeting in India. Just shows that he's a human being after all. He prefaced his contribution at that event by saying he had a little hangover yesterday morning and all of that. It shows he's human, and it's also human to be excited, to also have great expectations, as he pointed out. Two major things he did yesterday, the business meeting, and later in the day he met with Nigerians in India, surprising. You know, so many Nigerians in New Delhi alone. I'm sure if you were to take a census of Nigerians in the whole of India, their population will probably be, you know, as huge as that of people living in Agege or Ikeja. But in any case, that's just an aside. One major revelation, again, that we have seen, apart from the business deals, was President Tinubu telling his audience that he used to be a security guard. That's quite a revelation. Well, I hope some of his skills as a security guard in his early days, he will bring it to bear on his present assignment. He said he also used to be a teacher. Well, education is one of the things we're worried about. We hope that, you know, that old knowledge as a teacher will guide him. Then above all, his ambition is to end the regime of bad leadership in Nigeria. Yes, Nigerians are looking forward to good leadership in all of that regard. And he said, well, he's relieved that his job is secured. And that's where I'll begin from. Well, what we have been told now is that, well, he should moderate his jubilation because the matter is not yet over. As you know, Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party indicated at his residence yesterday in Onitsha, Anambra State, and as former Vice President Atiku Abubakar also pointed out at the PDP Secretariat in Abuja yesterday. Both opposition leaders made it clear that, yes, they respect the judgment of the appeal court, of the Presidential Election Petition Court, but that they do not think that the judgment has given substantial justice. So, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar says he has instructed his lawyers to proceed immediately to the Supreme Court, where the battle continues, or where the war continues, whichever, you know, suits the purpose in this instance. And that whether he wins or not at the Supreme Court, he just wants it on record that he did his best to fight for democracy and that he remains confident in the ability of the judiciary to, you know, protect the wishes of the people. And significantly, he slammed INEC, accused INEC of undermining the introduction of technology, where it's for his lawyers to identify the issues that they want the Supreme Court to look at. In the case of Mr. Peter Obi, speaking in Onitsha, he himself more or less said the same thing, that he doesn't think that justice has been done, that he respects the ruling of the court, but that he and his party disagree with the reasoning and the conclusions. Now, it remains for his own lawyers to, you know, who have also been instructed to proceed to the Supreme Court. So this is in line with Section 285 of the Constitution, and it's perfectly within the rights of these opposition leaders to say that they want to exhaust the entire process, which then leads me to the reactions. Former Governor Wike, now Minister of the FCT, has said, oh, Mr. Peter Obi is complaining about the judiciary, but when the same judiciary ruled in his favor to become governor of Anambra State, he didn't complain then. Well, I think that's a cheap shot. You know, it's entirely beside the point. The circumstances are different. It's perfectly within the rights of Mr. Peter Obi and Waziri Adamawa Abubakar to say they're going to the Supreme Court. Now, second, Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State has also said he's appealing to Mr. Peter Obi and, you know, the Waziri Adamawa not to go on appeal, not to waste resources, and that they should come and join hands with President Tinubu to move Nigeria forward. But when the same Governor Yahaya Bello was asked about the cases involving 3 senators in Kogi State, he said, oh, this is a democracy. We are going on appeal. We will make sure that the representation of APC in the Senate is 3/3. Isn't that contradictory? Isn't that hypocritical? On one hand, he is defending the right of his own APC senators to go to the upper court. At the same time, he's advising other people not to disturb the APC. So this is the kind of double standards that we see on display. However, the people that need to be cautioned are the spokespersons. They seem to have returned to work in a fury. You know, there was a time when the matter was in court. We had some relief from loquacious spokespersons, but they are back. You see APC firing from this side, PDP firing from that side. I think that these spokespersons should take the cue from their leaders. I mean, Mr. P2B is not belligerent. Atiku Abubakar is not belligerent. They have both said they respect, the position of the Election Petition Tribunal. But the spokespersons have started this round of name calling, exchanging brickbats. I don't think we need anybody to heat up the system. The judiciary should be allowed to do its work. Finally, the opposition lawyers of the Labour Party and also the People's Democratic Party, as at 7:25 p.m. yesterday, were complaining that they have not received the certified true copy of the judgment that was delivered on Wednesday. And that, given the fact that they have 21 days to file their appeal, they do not want a situation whereby delay in receiving the CTC will limit, the scope within which they can file their petition. So whatever can be done to make sure that that CTC is released, because in any case, they can't file their appeal at the Supreme Court on the basis of newspaper reports or newspaper commentary. They will have to have concrete, material. As for INEC, well, INEC, so much said about INEC yesterday. The opposition parties, they are not sparing INEC, but nobody should hit all the politics. They should allow their lordships to do their work. And lawyers, as professionals, they will know what to take to the Supreme Court. But whatever it is, at the end of the day, everybody should give peace a chance. The bigger outcome, of course, will be further review of the electoral framework, because each election cycle, we learn certain lessons. We identify those lessons, and I hope that on the basis of those lessons, the APC-dominated National Assembly will see need to take another look at the Electoral Act as it is. As for the other details, let's leave that to the courts and the lawyers to determine what will be the outcome, eventual outcome of this process, namely the presidential election process.
Well, following yesterday's press conference, the World Press Conference by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, and the address on the press conference by the Labour Party's presidential candidate, Mr. P2B, it's obvious that we haven't come to the end of the road yet, as they both have said very emphatically that they will be taking this matter up till the Supreme Court. In fact, Mr. Atiku Abubakar had mentioned that the PPC was not the final arbiter, and this was agreed by Mr. P2B, who said that they didn't have the final say and it didn't end with them, and they were hopeful that their matter before the Supreme Court would get judicial review, and perhaps they would be able to challenge the decisions reached by the PPC. But beyond that, since their press conference has been widely discussed this morning, I'd like to just touch on another aspect that they really emphasized on, again, both of them in agreement in terms of their view of the way that INEC handled the last elections. In fact, I'd like to take a quote from our Vice President and also from Mr. P2B with regards to how they view INEC and the role that INEC plays in matters of election and election petitions with regards to perhaps stealing the number of petitions we have if only that institution can carry out its duties and functions effectively. So Mr. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar said, our gains in ensuring transparent elections through the deployment of technology was heavily compromised by INEC in the way it managed the last presidential election. And I'm afraid that the judgment of the court, as rendered by the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, failed to restore confidence in our dreams of free and fair elections devoid of human manipulations. I'll come to that shortly, but let me share also what Mr. P2B said. He underscored the pivotal role of solid national institutions and public confidence in them in a thriving democracy, pointing out that the electoral litigations can be significantly reduced if INEC discharges its statutory functions transparently and fairly. So this is their position. Beyond the ruling of the court is the fact that we wouldn't be here, or perhaps we wouldn't have as many cases if only the institution responsible for carrying out elections or for managing the process does its job excellently. And this is part of the petitions that they had prayed before the court in the PPC. And for a number of people who heard the judgment around, especially the use of IREV, it was quite disappointing, because one of the big big conversation before elections, and what inspired, I guess, a number of young people and generally Nigerians to give the election cycle a chance and have an improved system where we didn't have voter apathy as much as we did perhaps in the last election, was that it was meant to be a game changer, whereby as people voted, the results were transmitted live to a server. But the ruling here states that it's discretionary, so it's at the discretion of INEC. And not just in the last election, but in previous elections, we have had challenges with the way that elections are run and the transparency, or in some instances, the complicity of INEC with certain parties or the ruling party in election irregularities or malpractices. Of course, these are mere allegations, and the proof of burden is on the petitioners to demonstrate that indeed, the elections were fairly run. Now, what happens in this case is that even in instances, as we saw in the case of the Kogi elections, the senatorial elections, where now Mrs. Natasha Akpoti Uduaghan has been restored as a candidate by the court based on the difference in votes. What then happens to the institution that was responsible for that process, who in their carrying out of their duties didn't quite do their due diligence, and under their watch, election malpractice, manipulation of votes, numbers of votes occurred. The issue we have is that even when a court rules in that line, there are no punitive measures for the institution. We do hardly revisit the process and why someone in INEC shouldn't come under investigation or perhaps some form of punishment for that happening. Why did it happen? And so in situations, in this matter, the court hasn't ruled that INEC has done, in terms of wrongdoing, but it gives us an opportunity in terms of lessons learned to see even the way our institutions are run. If not, come the next election cycle, we're going to be back here again, petitioned, and then rather than the people deciding and expressing their will in terms of who they want to be their candidate or who they want to be their leaders, it's decided by courts. It's decided by a panel of judges. And so it's important for us to take away that big lesson from the last election cycle, to strengthen our institutions. And where possible, let there be an independent investigation into the processes, because if the people complain that the process was flawed and there are reports to that effect, that there were irregularities which marked the process, then it cannot just end with this, with the court ruling. Yes, it's important. It's great they're taking it to the Supreme Court. But INEC has a case to answer to the people as well. And this is what the two principal petitioners had mentioned in their speech yesterday. Again, as Ms. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar mentioned, his constitutionally guaranteed right is to go on appeal to the Supreme Court. And now, all eyes are back on the judiciary, this time the Supreme Court justices, to ensure that this case is reviewed judicially as the ought. And at the end of the day, some gray areas, especially as we have talked about a number of times, the 25% issue in Abuja not being given special status, now being recognized as a 37th state in Nigeria, and those other matters with regards to the electoral law and framework will be addressed.